Hi, my name is Alex Dolphin. Welcome back to another episode of Ex Ante. Today we're going to discuss the case Unitrin versus American General Corp. This case was heard in the Supreme Court of Delaware in the year 1994. Let's go ahead and jump into the facts of the case. Both Unitrin and American General Corp sell commercial insurance. AG is the number one in market cap in the industry, so pretty big company. Unitrin is number three. So these are two mammoths in this industry. And American General Corp decides, well, you know what, we want to buy Unitrin. Maybe we want to buy this competitor. Maybe we want to grow a little bit. For whatever reason, AG says, we're going to try and buy Unitrin. And so AG sends a letter to the Unitrin board. And essentially what this is it's a bear hug letter. This is saying, hey, we'd love to buy your company, and we're just not going to let go. Even if you say, no, we're not going to let go. And what we mean by that, when we say we're not going to let go, is we're going to send a tender offer to all your shareholders. We're going to see if they want to sell the company to us. And so the price that AG offers is $50.03 per share, which is a premium on what the share price is currently trading at in Unitrin. But the board still doesn't like this offer for two reasons. First, the board doesn't like this offer because they think that it fundamentally undervalues the company. They think that this offer is it's too low. In the long term, Unitrin is going to be worth a lot more money than it is right now. And so the Unitrin board says, no, this offer is not good. The stockholders might take it because it's a premium, but it's not good. It undervalues the company. And then two, the board has some antitrust concerns. Whenever you have a first and a third, so 1 and 3 merging, an industry that might raise antitrust concerns under Section 7 of the Clayton Act. So something to think about. The court doesn't really focus substantially on that, but that's another justification for why the Unitrin board doesn't like this deal, why they don't want it to go through. So what does the Unitrin board do? Well, they institute some defensive measures. The first thing they do is they institute a shareholders' rights plan, or a poison pill, otherwise known as a poison pill. What this does is if anyone acquires more than 15% of Unitrin, they're essentially going to get washed out because all the other shareholders are going to get in the money options that they're going to exercise those rights and basically dilute the hostile acquisition, the acquirer that's doing this hostile acquisition out completely, because more shares will be issued in the company, so their 15% share is going to be less. And essentially what this poison pill is going to do is going to make this hostile acquirer kind of running up a hill that's just ice. You're never going to get to the top of it. And that's what that poison pill is going to do. Very strong defensive measure. And the second thing that they do is they institute a repurchase program. So at the time of the tender offer, 23% of Unitrin was owned by the board members. They say they're going to buy a bunch more stock. And essentially, the board members aren't going to tender, they're not going to sell their shares back to Unitrin, so they're going to hold on to all their shares. But other shareholders that want to sell their shares back to Unitrin for a premium are going to be able to do that. What that's going to do is it's going to increase the holdings of the board to 28% so that they have more of a share, more control over Unitrin. All right, so those are the two defensive measures that they put in. Now, Unitrin also has some shark repellent in its charter. Shark repellent is basically just get away sharks, what you'd think of. Get away hostile takeover artists. We don't want you near us. And that shark repellent is a supermajority merger approval provision. What that says is if any shareholder has more than 15% of the company, well, then they're going to have to get 75% of the shareholders to approve any of that type of merger. So you can see why this might be problematic, right? Because now, if this repurchase program goes through completely, well, Unitrin itself is going to have 28%, right? Which is going to make it impossible for the rest of the people, the rest of the shareholders, to actually do a deal, right? Because 28% is going to make it so that you can't get over that 75% supermajority threshold. Now that's big if the repurchase program goes exactly to plan. Okay, so the Chancery Court doesn't like this. They say, hey, the poison pill, it's okay. We bless poison pills often. But the repurchase program, this is just not going to stand Unical muster. It's not going to stand the intermediate Unical standards standard of review. This is just too much. It thwarts the shareholder enterprise completely, they say. Theoretically, you could do something here, but practically, shareholders aren't going to be able to participate in this AG tender. They're not going to have any choice. They say that is fundamentally a violation of Unical. You cannot take away all of the shareholders' choice to sell their shares. So Supreme Court goes the other way. Supreme Court says, yeah, the poison pill, we're going to bless it. And the share repurchase program, we're also going to bless that. This is just fine under Unical. And so the reasoning is a little bit roundabout. But it's interesting to start with first is the court says we're going to apply Unical here. We're not going to apply Blasius. Blasius is a case in Delaware corporate law, which essentially says if you're interfering, if your primary purpose as the board is to interfere with the shareholder voting process, then we're going to look at what you do under high level of scrutiny. The court says, well, it doesn't look like the board's primary purpose was to thwart a proxy contest, to thwart the shareholder voting process. So we're not going to really, Blasius kind of is going to hang in the background, but we're not applying Blasius. We're applying Unical. We're applying the defensive fiduciary duty, the defensive intermediate standard in Delaware law to this. And first they say under that standard, was this a reasonable threat to institute defensive measures with? So is the threat reasonable? That's the first prong of Unical. And the court says, yeah, okay, there was substantive coercion here, which is just saying the price was inadequate. In the board's eyes, the price was inadequate. And so that's a threat that justifies putting in defensive measures, which is just interesting. Pause and think about that for a second. Is just because the board decides that the price is too low, they can throw in a poison pill. Well, we could probably go back and forth about that. The shareholders elected the board, but they don't really have access to the proxy. But what the court says is if the board finds that the offer fundamentally undervalues the company, that's enough to throw in a defensive measure. That's the first part. Second part, were these defensive measures proportional? And this is where the court spends a little bit more time discussing the repurchase program. The pill, it says, is proportional. We've seen pills like this before. Poison pills are pretty blessed under Delaware corporate law. But the repurchase program, in tandem with the supermajority voting merger approval, those two things, that's what Chancery did not bless, but that's what the Delaware Supreme Court blesses. They do so, and they don't directly bless, they just kind of give some reasoning, which they do bless, and then they say, hey, Chancery, you got to remand this and look at the facts a little bit more. But essentially they're saying the proxy contest, the idea of a proxy contest, isn't completely thwarted by this repurchase program. Well, why? Because there's institutional shareholders. Institutional shareholders hold over 40% of Unitrin. So that means that the 42% of the holdings of Unitrin are very concentrated. We're talking pension funds, investment funds, hedge funds, things like this, where it's literally just one manager that can kind of make the call on this, or a group of managers at a fund that can make the call and say, hey, you know what, AG, we like this. This is a good call. We're going to go with your offer. So the court says, because this repurchase program, it doesn't completely thwart the shareholder enterprise. These big shareholders can still decide to vote with American General. They can still decide not to tender their shares and give them back to Unitrin. And so this defensive measure is within the range of reasonableness. It's not preclusive. It's not coercive. It's not forcing the shareholders to do anything. And it's not completely taking their choice to tender the shares away. What it is forcing American General to do is to bring a better offer to the table, right? And so if American General wants to continue this deal, well, then they might just need to raise their price until the board decides, hey, yeah, I want to sell these shares. There's nothing that was preventing the board from selling their shares. And these board members are holding a lot of shares. And if the price is high enough, hey, they have financial incentives themselves too. If American General is going to give you a great deal, why wouldn't you want to cash out, fly out on your jet to the Cayman Islands and hang out? And that's essentially what the court is saying, that all shareholders have this economic incentive to take the best option for them. And so if American General really wants this, well, then they need to give a better deal to the shareholders and to the board at Unitrin, who actually holds a large portion of those shares after the repurchase program. Very interesting case. It shows that boards have wide latitude to introduce defensive measures when there is a takeover threat under Delaware corporate law, and kind of a nice addition to fill out the contours of the Unical standard. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.